Okay, quick change artists here. So I'm going to moderate this esteemed panel, and I'm inviting questions. So we have a lady who's been extremely patient in the back row, and I'd like to ask the question.
Thank you. My name is Marie Gall. I'm from the Confederation of Danish Industry. I've been working with supplying the UN for a bit over 10 years, from a company's perspective first, and now with a business association. And I think I'd like to challenge you a bit. I think there's definitely been a shift towards a stronger focus on sustainable procurement, but if I look at the statistics, and now I'm talking about the entire UN system, if we look at how much is supplied from companies that have signed on to the Global Compact, it's not so impressive, and the increase is also not very steep. So it might be nice if we could see the UN as front runners in sustainable procurement, but in reality, I think maybe some companies are much further ahead. And it's the same thing, I guess, I hear from Danish companies. They do very well in supplying the UN, but if we ask them why, I don't think their focus on sustainability is something that they feel plays a big role. And I guess, that would be my question then to the panel. Part of it is because you have a lot of dilemmas in procurement. The more rules you put on in terms of ethical, environmental friendly procurement and so on, the more difficult it becomes for local companies, for SMEs and so on to compete. And of course it has an influence on the price as well. So I guess my question to the panel would be how to handle this dilemma. How can the UN become a front runner in sustainable procurement while at the same time dealing with those inherent dilemmas?
So maybe on this one, because I'm with the UN, I would volunteer to answer this. I did ask for volunteers. And I'm sure there are some opinions because, of course, you make a very, very good point, Muriel. The many businesses are much further ahead in sustainability than the UN is. But it behooves us all to move as fast as we can and as effectively as we can to introduce sustainability into our supply chains. And I think that overall the UN is working in that direction. The Global Compact has now more than 10,000 suppliers that have signed up for that to maintain certain a code of conduct and behave in certain ways with contracts, etc. And that's something that's very important to us, and that will continue to evolve. The supplier community has to find that of value for them, of course. So we move, and it's a great opportunity for small and medium-sized enterprises to become a supplier to the UN. And to engage in other more important things like setting standards for anti-corruption measures across the world. So there's some really good things happening. I think the UN's agenda is very, very broad, and the areas you can participate in with sustainable procurement are many, many. And so while it may seem that we're not making much progress, I think behind the scenes there is a lot of progress being made. We are a political organization, and some of the holdback is the dilemma that we face in terms of member states. Not all member states are in agreement with 100% sustainability. They're going to define sustainability in a way that's not going to unexpectedly interrupt their own countries. For example, our policy indicates that we will advance sustainability within the context of the country. So what are they willing to do, and how far can we go working with the authorizing environment in that country? And we have to respect that that country needs to protect its own national industries and not put them at risk for projects within their countries that may actually cannibalize or make extinct their own businesses. So we have to move towards sustainability in a way that our member states and our stakeholders actually are able to do so in a responsible way. So I will say that your pushback is good and we appreciate it. It's important for all of the UN organizations to be advancing in this direction within the realities that we face and respecting the country context of the governments that we work in and for. So thanks for the great question. So, do we have another one? Great. A lady here over in the back row. Oh, I guess we're closer to this lady. We'll be back to you.
Is it on? Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Signe Gyrup, and I'm a CSR advisor at Global CSR with special expertise in business and human rights. Many thanks for inviting us for this symposium. I think it's a really, really important issue that you raise. Nevertheless, I want to continue the debate on the responsibility of the UN in particular and focus a bit more on human rights, because no one in this room has mentioned human rights today. And when we talk about procurement practices, this is an area where we can make a huge, huge impact, especially as a UN organization. And not only talking about the voluntary initiative of the Global Compact, but if we actually look at what the UN decided in 2011 on the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, it actually expects both businesses but also the UN to incorporate management systems to prevent and mitigate that they have any adverse impacts on human rights. So I would like to know how the UNAPS is actually planning on implementing the guiding principles in their procurement practices. Thank you.
I'm going to suggest we answer that twofold. I'm going to suggest that UNOPS actually does have a lot in their procurement that protects human rights and workers' rights. But today I think it would be very, very interesting to hear from David, because you may recall in his presentation he actually talked about slavery and other examples of human rights that I think are very big and important to the profession. David?
Yeah, I mean, when I talked about the slavery campaign on Walk Free, etc., we actually had our annual dinner last week, and we got Sherry Blair, who, those of you not aware, can you hear me? Sorry. Sherry is the wife of our ex-Prime Minister, but she's very big into human rights. That's her her campaign she's leading around the world. And we talked a lot about how that links to licensing the profession and what we're trying to do. And I think it's a very difficult area to say we can change the world, but we have to make a start. And I think that what she said, and which is very pertinent, is that we're at the sharp end. As purchasers, we're at the sharp end. And that's the point I was trying to make in my speech, that and it's the reason that Walk Free came to us and this billionaire and everything, because we can make a difference. We have our hands on the tools, whether we think it or not. Therefore, what we do can make a difference because we can make those decisions and abide by them. So the reason we're pushing this licensing is because simply of that. It's all driven by the profession needing to stand up and take the lead at the front hard edge. I'd just like to make another point as well as a question on the previous question about this difficult balance between bureaucracy and non-bureaucracy. And we're conscious in asking for the profession to be licensed. We're bringing more bureaucracy into play. We're asking for more regulations, and for small companies, that's probably the last thing they want to hear. But I think what overrides that is good behaviour and the right thing to do, because ultimately that's what will make a difference. Particularly, as I said, from our members in Africa and Asia, who are in these invidious positions that I spoke about earlier. So I do feel that it is an area that needs a degree of regulation. I did make the point, it's self-regulation, that the ideal here is that chief execs say, we will do that because why wouldn't we? Rather than governments impose it, because then there's ways, people find ways around it. So I hope that message came across. The reason we've stood up and said this profession has to make a difference, and it can make a difference, is driven by the rights of humans around the world. And that's very important to us.
Thank you, David. I think Britta also wanted to comment on this very topic.
Yes, thank you. Just briefly, I would like to mention that within my beautiful discipline, when we talk about sustainable supply chain management, we of course talk about the economics, also the environment, but the third aspect is the social aspect. So that is of course very, very important. So in a way, I apologize for not having mentioned it that directly, but it is important. Coming back also, as David did, to DI and new standards, more bureaucracy and so on. Yes, right. Smaller companies, SMEs, have done that before. When we got the requirement on quality, there were new certifications when they should learn how to produce just in time or deliver just in time. They also learned that. So that, in my opinion, is just how the world is going on. And, well, it's a lot of work. Yes, it is. But you also get better. And we just need to get better in this area.
Thank you very much. We had a question from a lady, and she's got her hand up. Could we hand her the mic, please?
Hi, my name is Bethany. I'm an SME consultant. As we saw from the last poll, 65% of the respondents aren't really participating in sustainable procurement. I'd be curious to hear from each one of you what you think the largest single hurdle is that businesses are encountering.
Great question. Can we start with you, Henrik?
Yes, I'm not sure I can give a direct answer to it, but I think large companies than AP Moller Maersk, we definitely have an obligation to be part of the education and capability building within sustainability and, as we call it, responsible procurement. David said it's the right thing to do, but you also have the obligation to tell people what to do. And if we are sort of on the edge of new processes, new ways of doing things, we have an obligation. We actually have a program to do the capability building together with our suppliers. And I think not talking cost, but talking value, that is actually enabling that discussion so that we get a more sustainable supplier interaction and we actually take upon ourselves to improve the capabilities in the supplier community to get to that level.
If I could just add to that and say, for me, there's a couple of things going on here. One is sustainability is a long-term thing, and this is part of the issue because whether we like it or not, most organisations are very strongly driven by short-term gain. It still goes on, and it still happens a great deal. And you can understand in a recession that we've been through in the generally in the world, short-term has come to the fore again. Because people want to survive. It's as basic as that, financially. So that's part of it. I think the other part for me, just looking at I wasn't in the middle of this, but from the outside now looking at it, is it's what I said earlier, that as a profession we need to sell it, and we need to sell the advantages of this long term, because it's very hard to go to a chief exec or an ops director, whoever it is, and say, you know, we've got a great thing for you, but you're going to wait 5 years, or it's going to take 3 years. And by the way, all those great savings I made you last year, you're not going to get them this year. And there's the harsh financial reality of it in the private sector. And that's what we're faced with. And I think, for me, that's about having the articulation ability to say this is what the right thing to do is. Our supplier base has to be sustainable. Our activities have to be sustainable. These short-term one-offs is where we got to with the messes I talked to you about, with horse meat and goodness knows what. So I think there's a reality there, and there's something we can do about it by selling ourselves better.
I think my answer to that would be, what are we individually doing? Because, you know, we're the ones that are going to make the businesses take the steps in that direction to create a sustainable world. You know, businesses live off of earnings per share, stock market value. And we're the ones that continue to buy their products, right? And so we need to stand up and ask for sustainable solutions, sustainable products, sustainable services. And as we're satisfied, we'll continue to buy from those companies who demonstrate that the world is important to them and that our values are shared with them. And I don't think yet we have a loud enough voice. We're all raising awareness. We're all within our jobs doing our responsible thing. But until the collective whole speaks out loudly, then we'll continue to play with sustainability in a way that's affordable and that people can manage. And it's only when there's a loud crowd from us, the consumers, that we'll see a difference. That would be my personal view on it. Okay, another question? Can we take one from the people who are online with us, please?
Yeah. So this is the question from Guzman. If a supply chain professional, 3 years of experience, wanted to develop an international career in supply chain and procurement, what would be the top skills he or she should be developing ASAP to be able to stay amongst the best within the next few years?
That's a fun one. Would you like to try that, Henrik?
Again, these are tough questions and no easy answers. I think you need to be mobile. You need to have a mobility angle to yourself. You need to take up job in basically any part of the world on a short-term basis. You should probably take a stint in sales. You should be an engineer at the same time. All of these, it doesn't happen, but you should have that passion for procurement to make a difference and be mobile in order to make it. And then understand the business you go into. And I'm not saying any detail of the business, but understand the business acumen. And really, this is business. This is not a procurement discipline. So you need to understand the strategic drivers of the business. What are their top 3 objectives that they want to achieve? And then finding the procurement angle to that. And maybe a stunt in sales will also do you good. So this is a very broad experience. We take people from engineering, from sales. We basically take anybody outside of procurement, because procurement is something that is eventually going to get there. We also take people who have a holistic view on business. We work as teams, so all the qualifications, they are actually part of what the team will be able to do. But mobility, change, and then a general business acumen, that will get you a long way.
That's a great answer, Henrik. You've covered everything I wanted to talk about.
Sorry about that.
I think all I would add is what I said in a presentation. This profession's got, I believe, it's got a fantastic future. But for the reasons, and I won't go over the reasons again, but it has because of where it is and what it does. But it's also got a huge risk. And that risk is that we don't attract the right people who do what Henrik said. And I think the one thing he said that I really do feel strongly is this ability to sell yourself and to understand the business strategy. You know, when you get into boardrooms, you don't talk cost reductions. You talk about how you can add to the company strategy, and that will make this profession change for the future. And that's what it desperately needs, and we need to attract the best to do that. But I think it's got a long-term sustainability because of what I talked about, the global environment, and that the successful companies of the future are the ones that manage their supply chains around the world. I'll go back to Apple. You know, again, it's no coincidence that their CEO, as the supply director, they recognise that they can't stay ahead of the innovation curve forever. What they can do is stay ahead of the execution curve. So the skills in this role, aside from what Hendrik said, is your analytical skills, your negotiation skills, are fundamental to the success. And it does boil down again to relationships. That's what negotiation is, and the skills that come out of that. Back to my negotiation challenge I taught, the game. The skillful kids of that are the ones who get that, and it is a very complex beast, good negotiation. We all think we're great negotiators, don't we? There's very few of us actually are.
Obviously, I only have a few things to add to all this. And the first thing is, well, building on what David already has said about selling the profession, I would maybe also call it communicating, and communicating the value creation to top management. I think that is so important. I would also get back to one of Henrik's slides, because I read something he did not talk about, but now I'll help you. He said, or one of his slides said, if anything is about people, it is SRM, and that is supplier relationship management, of course. So the social skills to be able to communicate and work with people from other disciplines is, in my opinion, so important. And now that some of my students are here, I would again like to emphasize teamwork, right, and presentations, right. So that's what should be trained in addition to the other things mentioned by these gentlemen.
Thank you all. It was a question. It gathered a lot of good suggestions for all of you in the audience that either are looking for your first job in procurement or maybe even your last job in procurement. It never changes. The attributes that you need remain the same. Another question. I saw a lady here with her hand up. Do we have a mic? Right in the front. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Caroline Onyango, and I am new in Copenhagen from Washington, D.C. And the person who posted that online question actually already answered the question I just wanted to ask about getting into the profession. Obviously, I've been very interested in getting into procurement. I am a lawyer. But every time I look at job openings in the procurement industry in UNOPS or Maersk or whatever companies out there, they need you to have procurement experience. And, my question obviously has been answered now, which was, what value can a lawyer bring to a procurement team? And go ahead, and then I have a follow-up question as well. Go ahead.
Well, let's have a follow-up question. Let's have the follow-up question too at the same time,
as well,
please, Caroline.
I mean, obviously trying to expand my my network and trying to better myself, I also applied for a master's in MSc, Supply Chain Management at CBS. They told me that because I already have a Canjur degree, I will be at the bottom of the line because they consider that I already have a master's degree, so they're going to put me at the bottom when they do the intake, just so you know. But anyway.
Okay, so let's at least deal with the question of the legal skills.
Lawyers in procurement, yeah. I think we have both a legal department within procurement to make sure that our contracts are rightfully entered into, but I don't think this is what you're talking about. We also have a number of people who have a legal background, and we actually have a number of successful procurement people with a legal background, because it's analytics, it's about taking in complex stuff, presenting it in an easy, readable format upwards in the system. So we want people with analytical skills, whether they are lawyers or they have an economic background, people who can assimilate complex stuff, talk it back, and make sense out of it. And I actually do believe that lawyers can do that. They have a room in procurement, and I'll give you my card afterwards, and then we can see whether there are any opportunities in AP Moller Maersk.
Thank you.
Excellent. David, did you want to say something on that topic?
I can't match that, I'm afraid. However, carefully, a lot of the best people I meet in procurement supply have come from other functions and come in and learnt the techniques and the skills in the function and then gone on from there. So that very rarely have they spent their entire career. So I'll say the obvious thing here. Your key to success is getting a membership of MSIPs. I would say that, wouldn't I? Or a license to practice, which is people have said to me, well, is that going to restrict good people from coming across? Well, no, it shouldn't, providing we make it flexible to accommodate them and make sure they get the skills immediately. Because the problem coming from another profession is understanding very quickly the key skills that are needed in the role. And that's what we can give you. That's a recruiting statement. I'll stop there before I get in trouble.
I think procurement traditionally recruits from disciplines such as law, engineering, business administration, finance, accounting, quantitative methods, quantitative research, etc. I know really excellent procurement people who were teachers. It's having the skills that were outlined in the earlier questions that I think makes the difference.
But being a lawyer is a very good point of departure for going into procurement and supply chain management, because that is about relationships. So contract management is also, from a theoretical point of view, very important, because you can probably easier than anyone else learn how to think about protecting yourself while still creating these win-win situations between you and the supplier. So I really hope to see you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, we have a couple over here in this corner.
My name is Jolanta Woźniak. I'm representing UNICEF. My comment is related to first presentation, and I would say that now we should talk about sustainable supply chain instead of sustainable procurement, if I correctly understood the message.
Yes, I think I talked about the terminology around the profession, and the supply chain covers the entire end-to-end. I've had many debate on this over the years, as I'm sure most of you have, and I made my position clear at the start on what it should be. But that's not going to change overnight, and indeed in public sectors around the world, procurement is a far stronger word, and it encompasses, in their mind, supply chain. So as we are the most global profession, we are the only profession that can't seem to get a global name to ourselves. But I think that's part of becoming global, and in time it will evolve into what you've just said, I would say. So can I just say before I forget, because I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but one of the strange little things, or not strange, but one of the key indicators I've found in looking at the profession over the last 20 years, when I started out, I would say 89, 90% were male. I can tell you now, of 100,000 members, half are female. And that, for me, is significant, because that's starting to show that it is becoming not just inclusive, but stronger relationship. I could get in a lot of trouble here with the males in the audience, but that for me is quite significant.
Thanks for sharing that fact, David. That's very interesting, and for women it's very positive. It has been a male-dominated profession for many, many years, but I think diversity in every sense, whether it's gender or age or discipline that we come to the table with, makes us better teams. I saw the young man with the blue shirt with UNOPS on it had a question.
My question goes to Henrik Maisk. Do you have some sustainable development strategies that you suggest to your customers? For example, full load trucks, last mile logistics, or you just execute as your customers so wish?
good question, and this is part of our agenda. Not least because a lot of what we carry in our containers is actually demanded by the consumers. This is the IKEAs, the Unilevers of this world who have big sustainability programs. So in part of our carbon reduction program is also to make sure which is the most sustainable way of getting a container from A to B. And this could be developing sea roads instead of moving it by truck, getting it from truck to trains, getting it from trains to barges. So this is all part of the holistic sustainability agenda that we try to drive. We don't just take, this is the way we want it. We actually offers alternative methods which from a total value to the consumer and then to our customers is a far better proposition than what they might think it is to begin with.
Okay, we have a question right here from this young lady.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Natalia. I'm from Germany and Logistics University. I'm studying global logistics. And concerning this question, like some kind of connected, I wanted to ask about consulting industry. Like there are a lot of consulting agencies which are working with supply chain and procurement in particular. So how does it apply? Are you using consulting or somehow? Thanks.
The short answer is yes. I think we cannot expect to be a 500-man organization, although globally, to have all the best insights. So we work with everyone who's sort of giving us an edge. This could be consultants, this could be associations, this could be other companies, meeting with them and finding out what is it they do. So we work with all kind of expertise to get us to the next level. And whether they are consultants, industry bodies or associations, as long as it's a give and take, then we are always inclined to do this, to get better and to get better solutions.
Yes, and from UNOP's perspective, we would echo the same thing. Yes, we use consultants. Are they important to us? Absolutely. They're as important as all the other business partners and potential business partners that we understand today we really need to be able to work with and through, because collectively we're going to come up with much better solutions than we will on our own. So talent is most important to us in whatever form that comes into. SMEs, large businesses, associations, universities, or the business across the street, another UN organization, a government. We have to work together. The world, the problems are so complex. None of us alone have the solutions. Together we'll address them. Great question. Can we have a mic here at the back row? I think everybody's sitting in the back row today.
Hi, my name is Rosângela Neves. I'm working with UNDP here in Copenhagen. I've priorly worked with IAPSO, the Interagency Procurement Services Office, also here in Copenhagen. My question goes especially for Henrik and Teresa. Henrik, I know you worked and lived, I understand, 4 years in Brazil at the end of the 90s until the beginning of, until 2002. Being Brazilian, I understand and I know that it's quite often a matter of money under the table to have some processes and projects moving on. So I would like to hear your private market perspective and the UN perspective on this very difficult issue of corruption and moving in between the established systems in such countries. What can you share with us?
I can share that the world has moved on since I lived there. But also that if you have a internal value set that is strong, then you just don't accept it. And you just professionally communicate to your suppliers that this is not the way we work. You might lose a deal, you might lose the best deal, but long term, you're doing the right thing. And I have seen issues in Brazil when I was there, but it's fairly easy to just make the call and say we're not going to be part of it. And this is part of our value set, and this is strong. So I don't see it as a problem. I see it's a global world, and more companies and suppliers are living up to these ethical standards, also in Brazil. So I did not personally encounter anything, but we did see competition and others taking advantage. But in the long run, it's not going to get us anywhere.
Thanks. I love this question. I love it because in our world, it's a reality. There are bad actors out there. So what do we do to address that? There's a number of things going on. And the things aren't just about what the UN's doing. It's about what private business is doing. It's about businesses who, as competitors, have to compete with companies that perhaps pay service fees or name them as you will, in order to get business. And if they don't want to play with the same rules because their values have a higher ethical standard, then it makes it very difficult. So there is a collection of good actors that are taking up the mantle against corruption and fraud and unethical behaviors. The Global Compact has a call to business right now, asking for consideration for, as the current MDGs, some of you who aren't familiar, the development goals are coming to an end next year, and they'll be replaced with a new set. And there's a call to action suppliers to speak loud and clear that they would like to have the world agree to continue the anti-corruption agenda. And so that's ongoing. Most UN organizations and development organizations have significant sanctions programs in place so that if there are allegations of fraud and corruption or bad actors, that there are investigations undertaken and people are held accountable for their behaviors. And the move today is to make those companies that information publicly available so that others are aware that there's a bad company that needs to be retrofitted, and they can take action because other organizations won't deal with them. So there's a number of actions going on that address this problem head on. For procurement, you heard David earlier talk about fraud and corruption's training programs on his website that people can take. We should all do that. Other organizations are doing the same thing just to create awareness and then create skills and then create enough of a groundswell of people against such activities that behaviors change. And that is happening. Great question. Thanks.
Can I just add to that? Thanks for the plug there, by the way. Our biggest selling product actually is fraud training. So there's a huge amount of recognition out there that procurement fraud has to be, I shouldn't say fraud, anti-fraud trading, anti-procurement fraud training is out there. I'm just conscious, and I want to add, it's very easy sitting here to say, don't do it. But when you're in that invidious position I talked about where your boss is telling you to do it, if that ever happens to you, you need whatever protection you can get from, as I said earlier, some form of professional body, whether it's us or someone else, who at least you can tell what's happened without necessarily being able to go down naming and shaming the corporate. But there's websites out there like Walk Free which would do that for you. So I'm not saying it's the whole answer, but it is an invidious situation. The hardest thing I have in this job is meeting particularly Africans who come to me and say, as members of the Institute, what do I do? Because as I said earlier, my boss is telling me to do something that's unethical or it's fraudulent. And all we can do is take and protect them personally in terms of their profession license. That doesn't help the day-to-day. This is a long game, unfortunately, but it's one we have to demonstrate as a profession. We're right at the heart. I said, whether we like it or not, we're seen at the heart of it, and we have to solve it.
Thanks, David, and what a great question to end our day on. So on that note, I've got a hand over here. Burning?
Yeah, I mean, I think the online buzz continues, and I know that we also have some questions on Twitter. So we get a couple of questions here, and some of those questions are very specific to development. So we may have to have another symposium on that. But here's one question on procurement, and it starts off as a very specific question to David Noble, but I think it brings up interesting aspects to which I think the other panelists may wish to contribute to too. So here's the question. I have a question for David, and this is from Eleanor. I have a question for David Noble. I'm interested in learning about your experience with the London Olympics and what long-term benefits the procurement practices of the 2012 Games brought the local population. As the Games require enormous quantities, oftentimes only large businesses are awarded contracts. However, local communities, especially in Brazil, which will host the upcoming 2016 Olympics, really need the opportunities that Games investments bring. Were there any programs that targeted vulnerable communities to supply services or products and which permitted long-term benefits?
The answer is there was a lot came out of that. I mean, one of our past presidents, a guy called Jerry Walsh, was head of LOCOG, which was the procurement for the Olympics, for the operation of the Olympics. And they set new records in diversity, in how they managed their spend, and also in the local regions, how they built SMEs from what I talked about earlier by using that spend cleverly. So I would contend there was an awful lot done. I know the park's just going to reopen, I think it's this year. And, as I said in my presentation, the overall success, and it's a dilemma of our function is when it goes well, no one hears about us. And with one small example, everything went very smoothly. But these things I've talked about, I think the only thing I can suggest to the one who's asking the question is I can put them in touch with that individual who did all these great things. And there's a story out there, if you look on the websites for the London Olympics, exactly what they did do. And they can learn from that. We've had some contacts with the Brazilian Olympics team anyway, because they came over when we were doing the assessments with LOCOG.
Thank you very much, David. Did you have another question there, Alex, from the...
Sorry, no, and I don't have another question here right now. But maybe the other panelists or also you, Therese, maybe you want to also talk about how to provide access to SMEs, to small and medium-sized enterprises, which was a part of this question, to these large procurement undertakings.
Certainly. We know that oftentimes our procurement people look at the requirement and will look and say, are there opportunities here for SMEs? Do we have to go internationally? Does it have to be big business? Or can we do as David has just suggested that they did for the Olympics and break the requirements up into smaller pieces so that more organizations get an opportunity to participate in the project and the contract awards. Obviously, procurement people have to ensure that, prices are competitive and it's fair, and the advantages that come from small and medium-sized enterprises, meaning no huge overheads and those types of things, the ability to be flexible and agile, can contribute to the project in a way that's meaningful, and that, again, that the costs are managed and that there is added value. So that's certainly something that most procurement people look for today. So is there a final question in the room before we end? Yes, thank you.
Hi, I'm Tennille from UNOPS, but my question comes from Twitter. It's talking about supplier diversity, and it's directed to you, Henrik, from Maersk. Does Maersk see a future where they report on supplier diversity?
I should probably have Renata, who's in the room, answer this question. But I think in every, she's heading our responsible procurement. But I think in any procurement organization, the key is to have a diverse and as many potential suppliers out there. That is what we want. And eventually reporting on it, yes, that could be. We're not there yet. But I think that the diverse portfolio of suppliers who can actually lift this, and I think it's a bit back to what we just discussed, it's in every procurement person's interest that we have a diverse supplier landscape that we can actually engage with and find the optimal solution geographically, globally, fitting the purpose of that project. So to me, this is not a number. This is a mindset, and you know, maybe there's a number that's right for something, and another number that's right in another part of the world. It's a mindset that you want a diverse supplier community to draw from. That'll get you the best results at the end of the day in the long run.
So supplier diversity is always an important topic. And in many countries, it's regulated, actually, that you have to report on your supplier diversity profile for disadvantaged groups, however that particular country defines disadvantaged groups. So if we fail, we as procurement people, we as business, if we fail in our organizations, if we fail in our attempts to make a difference as it relates to all of these things on sustainability, then the regulators will prevail. But I do believe, as I said before, that we as consumers have a role that we can play to ensure that businesses that we want to engage in are responsible. And we can do that with our own consumer dollars. So on that note, I'd like to ask the panelists to stay in their seats. But we're going to close now, and I would ask our COO, Vitaly, to come and do the ceremonies.
Thank you very much. My closing speech will last a little bit less than the time it took me to come all the way from the back of the scene. Once again, a big round of thanks to all of you, the colleagues here, and those that joined us, as they say, from all over the world. I think we had approximately 500 people listening to this event and contributing to the quality of what we heard today. Once again, huge thanks to our colleagues over here who came from abroad, mostly, to speak to us today. And what I thought about just a couple of minutes ago is a little song, don't ask me why, it's 45 years old, from a group called The Grassroots. I don't know how many of you heard that. And it's called All Good Things Come to an End. I used to like it as a teenager, so it was a wonderful event today while it lasted, but as all good things, it does come to an end now. And what we would like to do now is express our appreciation to colleagues that join us today and contributed their knowledge and experience, and offer them small token gifts while fully understanding that the gift of their presence today is far more valuable than the value of those little gifts. So thanks very much again, and let me do the needful. So big thanks to Henrik Larsen, the procurement, the vice president and procurement guru from Maersk, and Britta Kammersgaard. Thank you so much. And I hope, I missed the introduction this morning, but I hope all of you realized that she was quite closely associated with UNOPS for a period of time, when she also served on our Strategy and Audit Advisory Committee. So special thanks for that as well. And last but not least, big thanks to David Noble. the CEO of SIPS and one of our most important partners in procurement and supply chain. So thank you very much again, and hopefully this will be just the first event in a series of important gatherings like this. Thank you all.
Can we say thank you to Alex? Again, thank you very much. I would be remiss if I didn't thank the people who made this event possible. Alex Blecken and his team championed this. Philip, pardon?
Kettlord.
Thank you. He does it much better than I do. I think he does it in German just so that I'll never understand. Philip was great. He actually probably single-handedly did most of the preparation for this under Alex's guidance. All the people in the blue shirts, please stand up. You've been just tremendous to organize us today and to keep us coordinated. So thank you. And to the people here and those who have joined us online, couldn't have been possible without your participation. So a huge thank you to you, and I look forward to meeting you all or hearing from all of you at our next symposium. Thank you.
And of course, I would agree with me, huge thanks to Therese Ballard, Director of Sustainable Procurement, who was the driving force behind the whole event.